Hey, Catholic Divas. Last week we talked about accepting the changes of the seasons in our life. And today we're going to be talking about a vocation journey. So come on into the podcast and let's get started with this journey. Hey, this is Mama Jane.
And this is Mama Vicky. Welcome to the Cycles and Sanctity podcast.
I'm a Billings ovulation method instructor and a certified Catholic mindset coach.
And I'm a labor and delivery nurse, an IBCLC, and a La Leche League leader.
We're here to share with you the beauty and the pain of your cycles.
Have you considered honoring your cycle throughout the journey of your womanhood?
Have you ever considered your cycle as a tool towards your holiness?
Well, sisters, it is. We're excited to walk this journey with you.
So go grab your favorite journal and pen and your hot beverage, and let's do this. Hello, Catholic Divas. Welcome back to Cycles and Sanctity podcast. This is episode 82, a vocation journey, a wife's story. And today it's Mama Jane's story. Next week, it's going to be Mama Vicky's story. We have had a crazy state in life, change of schedules. And so we just really haven't been able to get into sync. So I'm just going to go ahead and record this podcast, and hopefully Mama Vicky will be here together, or she may be by herself next week. So we're just going to go with the flow. One of the reasons why we wanted to talk about this is going to be a little bit vulnerable. So we want to encourage you, if you have little children that you have around while you're listening to this podcast, just maybe listen to this with your AirPods or whatever. But this week is my 38th anniversary of Steve's and my marriage. And so we really kind of wanted to just open up and be vulnerable, of maybe possibly share a little bit about our stories of how we became wives and mothers. And so I'm going to be starting, and then next week, hopefully, Mama Vicky will be sharing hers. And like I said, I'm hoping that we will be able to be together, just because we're such a great partners, and I'm missing her right now, but she has things that she needs to do. And we understand that this is part of being an entrepreneur while you are also a wife and a mother and juggling many, many balls. So as I mentioned, this week is our 38th anniversary, and I was only 23 when I got married. And as I have mentioned a number of times, probably on this podcast, I was baptized and I received all of my sacraments as a Catholic, but I didn't know exactly what being Catholic was. We didn't have any kind of reference point. This was way before computers or cell phones or anything like that. We didn't have a crucifix in our home. If we had a Bible in our home, I don't ever remember seeing a Bible until my 7th grade confirmation, when our confirmation teacher gave us the way, which was back in 1975. That's how old I am. But you know what? God is good. God is really, really good. And this is the thing I want you to hear of how good God is, and that where sin abounds, grace abounds more. That's what St. Paul talks about. And so as I'm trying to figure out this Catholic way of life, not really having anybody to form me, unfortunately, I was a typical young college student and didn't live very virtuous life. And so when I met my husband, my future husband, we weren't living a chaste life, but I knew that I wanted to marry him. We were both in the military. He was a couple of years older than I was. And so while I had just arrived at Germany, he was actually getting ready to, what we call PCS, move back to the States. He had to go to school, and then he actually had a follow-on assignment to Colorado. And again, this is back in the 80s. This is 1986. And you have to look at the context, the historical context of this is that in 1976, when the ERA was passed, that's when women were allowed to be in the military. It's when West Point and all the military academies accepted women. And so this was like 10 years later. And of course, women being in the military, they're going to meet a guy and they're going to want to get married. So they had just passed this thing called dual military assignments. And so if you were both military and married, then the military would assign you within a 50-mile radius. Now, you also have to understand back then in Germany, 50 miles could be a different division. And so we could have been on completely different schedules and training and all of that stuff. And I do have friends that if you speak to women or family members that were in the military, that's exactly what happened. I have a friend whose husband was in Hawaii and she was in Korea. That's as close as they could get. So anyway, we knew we wanted to get married. But here's the other thing is I didn't really know what marriage was about. I didn't know that it was a sacrament. Our beloved priest, God bless him. I don't know. I keep asking my husband, like, what in the heck did he see in us? Because really the only thing that he gave us was what we call a focus. And it's just kind of an assessment. The guy takes it, the woman takes it, and then it's just kind of a starting point of like what you agree on and what you don't agree on. And we did it. And then the priest just kind of handed it to me after hours one day and like, here it is. You guys need to talk about this stuff, but you're doing really well in this area, which was the sexual area. So I'm so sorry. And I keep thinking back, like, why didn't he have a conversation with us? But this is fortitude and this is courage of like, we need to have a conversation about this, which he didn't. So that was as much marriage prep as we got. And again, like I said, my husband was getting ready to go back to the States. He had orders back to the States. And you can be engaged all day long, but until you have a marriage certificate, we're not going to reassign you. So we lived in Germany and the paperwork for two Americans was going to take 6 months. We didn't have 6 months. And there was this program called Darling Denmark. So we went up to Denmark. In the meantime, we had told our parents were both in the States. My dad being military, he jumped on a space available flight with my mom, my stepmother, and they came. And my brother also was in the military and his best friend was in Germany. So he also came. So they came up to Denmark with us. We got married on a Thursday and then we took the train back and we got back middle of the night on Friday morning. And then we got married in the church on Saturday. Now, here's the thing. I didn't know anything about anything. Like literally nobody told me anything. My captain gave me this bridal shower a few hours before we went up to Denmark because I didn't know anything about that. I didn't know about registrations. So a lot of times when I see all of this stuff that women go through, all of this bridal showers and this and that, I just don't understand it because I had a dress from my senior ball at a military ball that I had worn, and it was white and it was beautiful. And Steve had never seen it. So that's what I wore. I just got a veil. I had some flowers. I had a German friend who was my German teacher, and she became my bridesmaid. And we were going to keep it very small, mainly also because my husband had been engaged and they had gone through all of that stuff with a big wedding and the band and everything. And I knew I couldn't do that to him again. I just wanted to get married. I knew this was the guy that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. And so I was willing to sacrifice a big, huge wedding for the sake of the marriage. And so we had chosen to just have about 10 of our friends. And then we were going to go to a German restaurant and just keep it very small. But of course, my father and my stepmother came in and they had some stuff. So we invited all of our bosses and we had a reception at the O Club beforehand. And then we went out. But I'm going to tell you one thing I do remember, even though I didn't understand how important, I didn't understand that this was a sacrament. But first of all, I went to a German hairstyle and got my hair done and did my makeup. And then I drove to the chapel by myself. My stepmother was over at my husband's apartment and all the guys were getting dressed there and she was staying there as well. Number one, it was the day that I felt the most beautiful. And even when I look back 38 years later, that is the day that I felt the most beautiful. And then number two, I always remember when Steve and I were making our vows to each other, Steve looked in my eyes and I literally felt like he could see my soul. It was so amazing. But also, one of the things that I wanted to share about this is that I remember the questions that the priest asked, like, do you come here freely? Like, I didn't really understand that because we hadn't had any prep. But yeah, obviously, I came there freely. And of course, we were open to children, all that good stuff, health and sickness and all the things. But the other thing I remember is having our wedding bands blessed. And when Steve put that wedding ring on, I understood that that was very significant. Now, you have to understand, like, I didn't know any of this stuff. And it wasn't until we'd been married almost 3 years, we went on a marriage encounter retreat. And that's where they shared with us that a marriage is a sacrament and what a sacrament is, and that this was my vocation and that this was my path to holiness. Like, I didn't understand any of that. And really, nobody had ever actually even talked to me about, like, how do you choose a husband? What are you looking for? All I knew is that I wanted a Catholic guy, and Steve happened to be Catholic. So that fit the bill. But there was more to it than that. I mean, I knew he was the one, and there's just more in that decision making, understanding who he was, who he is, how much he is good for me. But that's what I wanted to kind of share with you is, like, once I understood that at that marriage encounter, I pursued understanding, what does the church teach about marriage? How do I live out this vocation? Like, this is the path to my sainthood. This is the path to my holiness. And so throughout the years, of course, 38 years, we've had ups and we've had downs. We have almost gotten a divorce. We got to a point where we were in a really, really bad state and it was really awful. And Steve packed his bags and said, I'm leaving. And he was going to file for a divorce. And that's what he threatened. And he was going to take the kids. That was what he threatened. And my whole life crumbled. Thanks be to God. We live about a half a mile from a Catholic church. And when he left, he stopped the stop sign and he saw the Catholic church. And he said, he thought, what the heck am I doing? I can't do this. And he came home and he looked at me in the eyes again, deep in my eyes, and said, we have to stay together, because if one of us leaves this house, one of our hearts will be hardened. We have to work this out together. And that was a moment of repentance and conversion and absolute grace. And that was like 15, 16 years ago. And we've been really on this path of willing the other's good. And even before that, though, whenever we were having an argument, I would say to the Lord, I'm wearing this ring not because of him, but because of you. Because I remember me taking that vow and I took that very seriously. And I knew that if I separated, that I would be disappointing the Lord. So those are the kinds of things I just want to share with you. Like, there is great grace. Like, even if you don't know everything about the Catholic Church. And like I said, I would always say to Steve, like, what did this priest see in us? Like, why did he think that we were going to be okay? And my beloved husband just like, I don't know, he just saw something. But years later, when we were in, believe it or not, our priest asked us to be marriage prep couples. And mainly because he knew our story and he knew that it's not peaches and cream, but we've endured, thanks be to God, and the graces that we've accepted and the conversions that we've had. So I was at a wedding of one of our couples, and I realized that the priest that married us didn't have confidence in us. He had confidence in the grace and in the sacrament. And while I probably wasn't receiving the sacrament as open, one of the things I do know from listening to Father Mike Schmitz in his baptism class is that every sacrament, the Lord shows up. He's bound by his sacraments. And yet he also expects us to cooperate. So we can present him with a stony heart where his sacrament will be surrounded, the grace will be surrounded up with our heart, but it won't be transformed or permeate our heart. Or our hearts could be like a sponge where you receive the sacrament and the graces fill that dried, crusty sponge and it is transformed into this beautiful, wet sponge, right? And I think that was the thing that I look back and think the Lord knew that I wanted to have a Catholic wedding. He knew that I wanted a Catholic family, and he honored that desire. And as Saint Therese of Lisieux says, is that every desire that we have in our heart, a good desire, I should say, is placed there by the Lord. And so why wouldn't we expect him to do that? She talks about being a saint. She said, if I have a desire to be a saint, then that desire came from God. And so, of course, I should expect to be a saint. He's going to give me all the resources to be a saint. And I think that was the thing that now that I look back is that I wanted a Catholic home. I wanted a Catholic marriage. I wanted to raise my children Catholic. And that was the desire from the Lord. And he gave me the graces through these 38 years. Now, have we done it perfectly? Obviously not, since we almost separated. Have I been a perfect wife? Obviously not. There were many times, like I said, I wanted to leave, but we stayed. And that's the faithfulness. That's the faithfulness of the marriage, is God's grace. We are a witness to God's love and everlasting love, his faithfulness. And that's the beauty of marriage. That's the thing I can just share with you. If you're thinking about getting married, or if you are married and you're having a difficult time, or even if your marriage ended, this is the part where we really want to get into, is that we're all sinners and we're not doing it very well. We need God. I don't know how anybody can be married without God's grace, without having a sacramental marriage, because it's through the sacrament that you receive the graces. And really, it's the graces that transform you and peels away the sin and purifies you. Then the other thing I wanted to share with you is like my insight. And again, this is a total grace from God, was the fact that when we did fight, I would take a moment afterwards and really kind of contemplate, like, where's my mistake? What am I doing wrong? Because I can't change my husband. And so that's really where I started to go to confession more often, because I said, well, I got to work on me. Something's going on. And so that's another thing, just to look at the grace of the sacrament of confession as not like judgment or condemnation, but a place of healing, a place of support. And especially if you have a good confessor, that a place where you can just kind of like dump it and just really, again, ask the Lord, where's the metanoia moment? What do I need to change? Even if he doesn't change, or even if she doesn't ever change, that's not the point. We're called to change. So I hope this was a very good episode. I hope you learned. I would love for you guys to come find us on Facebook, or even just email us. We would love to hear your insights. If if you want to review the podcast, that would really help too, because you know the algorithms with Apple and all the things. It's just like a radio. It's just like a record. The more radio stations play it, the higher it gets in the charts, right? So if you're enjoying this podcast, we'd love to hear from you, but we'd also love to hear your thoughts. And if you have any questions, if you have anything that maybe your marriage hasn't been the greatest, or maybe you still have some wounds and you still have some emotions that you need to help process, please reach out to me. This is what Catholic coaching is all about, is to help transform our thoughts so that we can process our emotions through the reason cycle, so that we can behave and we can really truly be the saints that God is calling us to be. We want you to be saints. We have a huge desire for you to be face to face in heaven with the Lord, and with us too. It's going to be a huge party, and I just can't wait. That's my Super Bowl. So thank you so much for listening. I hope this has blessed you. I hope that this has given you some food for thought. I want to encourage you to maybe reflect on your own marriage, or if you're not married yet, reflect on how do you want to show up as a wife, as a fiance, as a bride on your wedding day. Because again, the day is the day, but the marriage is the journey. And you've got to have the Lord with you. So God bless you all, and we will see you next week, hopefully with Mama Vicky. Hey, Catholic Divas, we hope you enjoyed this episode. And If you are having a little bit of mind drama, go ahead and click the show notes and schedule a free coaching session with me. I'll be more than happy to help you process your thoughts, your emotions, your perspectives on this. Have a great day.